Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to show you how you can deploy a Django app using AWS ECR and AWS EC2. So let's begin. So basically these both tools are used for deployment and also file sharing or image sharing like Docker images. So we can use AWS ECR for sharing a Docker image, and then we can take a pull on EC2 from ECR, which will enable us to run the Docker image for us. So let's begin. So first of all, we can head up to our VS Code where we can create a Docker file for a Django image. So I have a sample Django app which has nothing but the standard template for Django, which it shows on just creating the project. So we have Django app inside this Django app directory, and then we have a Docker file.django right here. So this Docker file is used for creating a Django image. I have standard Django Docker file here, which just says from Python. We have taken the base image as Python, and then we have created the work directory in slash app. Then we run some standard update commands, and then we can copy our requirements.txt to our root root directory, and then we can install the requirements using pip install no cache dir -r requirements.txt. Then I've just copied my whole Django app to my dot, and then I've exposed the 8000 port, and now we have run the production Gunicon command to run a Django app, which is Gunicon --- workers to declare the workers. I've kept the workers as 3 here. Then I've bind my local host here, and then I have just run the application in my WSGI. All right, so this is how you run a Django app in production using the cmd command, and this is a standard Docker file for a Django app. If you have static folder inside your Django app, you can run python manage.py collect static right here after you copy the whole Django app. And then you can also create a media folder if you have media folder inside your app as well. If you want to set some environment variables, you can set it using env flag. So you can set it using env, and then you can write the key value pair here. All right, so I have my image right here, which I think works great for this Django app. So I can now build this image, and then I can push it to ECR, and then we can work further with deployment on EC2. All right, so now, first of all, we can build this image. How we're going to build this is we can just do something like Docker. So first of all, obviously you need to have Docker installed on your system. So I have installed Docker using Docker Desktop through Windows CLI, and it works great for me. So you can try that as well. Um, then we can first of all do our thing, which is Docker build command to build the image. So we can run Docker build -d, and I'll name this image something like Django, and then I can refer to the file where this lies, which is Docker file.django, and then I can put a full stop here. So this shall create a Docker image for our Django app. All right, so let's just let it create that image, and then I can tell you what we can do further. So now we have to basically push this image to AWS ECR. So for this, we need to first of all configure AWS inside our system by installing AWS CLI. So I'll tell you how you can do that. All right, guys. So now I'll show you how you can create access keys for your AWS account. So head up to your AWS console and then head up to the your profile section, uh, your profile down bar, and you can see the security credentials tab here. Now click on that. And now scroll down to the manage key section, and you can click on create access key here. And now it will ask you to create the keys for a particular user. You can select the user for which you want to create some keys, but I'll just select the root user, which has all the permissions. But you can select any particular user which has limited access to the AWS services. So I'll just create a access key for my root user here, and I click on create access key. So here's the uh, access key ID and secret access key as well. You can copy these and set up in your AWS configure in a terminal. All right, so the second thing includes is downloading the AWS CLI package. You can install it for Windows through the MSI installer. You can search for AWS CLI install, and you can head up to the first link here and now go down in the Windows section, and you can head up to the AWS CLI official link, which is present right here. And now you can install it any way you want. And you can run this package like this and just follow through all the setup process and install the AWS CLI. All right, it is already installed for me, so it will not walk me through all the steps, but those are just simple steps which requires access to directories or permissions, something like that. For installing AWS CLI in your Linux system, the commands are relatively simpler. So you just have to hit a call request to AWS CLI server, and then you'll have to unzip the file you have installed here, and then just run this command sudo AWS install. That will install AWS CLI in your Linux system. Alright, so after you install AWS CLI, you can head up to your terminal. You can first restart your device and then head up to the terminal and look for AWS hyphen hyphen version to verify if AWS CLI has been installed or not. And if you get a version number just like this, that represents that your CLI has been installed. Now, for configuring the AWS CLI for multiple services, basically to configure your AWS account inside terminal, you can run the command AWS configure, and now you can enter all the access keys and all the secret access and also the region name, which are present right here. As you can see, I've already entered it, so it shows me a value right here, but it will show none if you have entered nothing as of now. All right, so I'll just click on enter because I don't want to change it right now. And AWS secret access key, you'll put the secret access right here. For the region name, just put the region name in which you're working. And for the default output format, you can keep it none as of now. All right, and now AWS has been configured now. So now you can start working with AWS. All right, so now I'll show you uh, the next part, which is configuring, which is creating a repository inside ECR so we can push that image to our ECR repository. So I'll first go to our ECR console. I'll head up to ECR service. I think it shall lie here, Elastic Container Registry. And if I go inside repositories, I shall see any repositories. I think I don't have any repositories currently. Yeah, I do not have. I can create a repository using create repository here. I can also create a repository using command line, which is a command. So first of all, I'll create the repository using AWS ECR, create repository. Then I can put a repository name flag to name my repository. I'll name it something like, I'll name it something like my Django app or something like Django app. Now I'll create this repository. This shall create a repository inside our AWS ECR. So now I'll check that here and I'll refresh it. So we have a Django app repository right here. Perfect. Now we can move on to the next step, which is authenticating Docker with ECR. So we have to authenticate Docker with ECR, and we can use that do that using a simple command, which is AWS ECR get login password. This is basically logging into Docker with our ECR account. We can do that by first of all running this command, which is AWS ECR get login password. Then I can pass in the region name, which is AP South 1 for me. Let me just confirm it. Yeah, it is AP South 1 indeed. And then I can run a pipe command along with it, which is Docker login. And then I'm going to pass AWS as the username. And I'm just going to pass the password as the standard input. All right, and then I can copy my repository URI, which is this. So this shall work now. And I can paste it here. I can remove the Django app because we just need to give Docker access to our whole ECR. All right, now if I run this command, this should log me inside Docker. Perfect. It says login succeeded. So we have logged in Docker using our ECR account. Perfect. Now we can move on to the next step, which is tagging and pushing the image to AWS ECR. So how do we do that? First of all, we have to tag our image to our AWS ECR account. How we can do that is Docker tag Django app, which is the name of the current image. I think the name was Django instead. Let me just check it. Yeah, it was Django, so I can name Docker tag Django, and I'm going to tag it to my ECR repo. I'll just paste it here again, and then I can tag it as an And then I can put a tag name. I'll just put tag name as Django to refer this to the Django image. All right, so I'll just tag it and now I'll check my Docker images. I should have the tagged image as well. Perfect. That's great. And now I can push this image by in the command docker push. Then I can paste the same image name and then the tag, which is Django. This should push my image to AWS ECR. So as you can see, it is pushing the image to AWS ECR. Perfect. So meanwhile, we can look upon other things like the Nginx configuration. So we will run Nginx as a reverse proxy server, which will basically forward our request from root URL to 8000 port where our Django app will be running. So we have to configure Nginx file as well. All right, so for this, we can create another Docker image for Nginx, so we can run both of them using Docker Compose. So Docker Compose will be used to run both of the images. Docker Compose is basically used to run multiple images at once. So we create a Docker Compose.yml file, and then we write in all the services we want to run. Then we just run the command Docker Compose up, and that will run all the services inside that. Perfect. So now I think you have guessed it. We are going to run Django service and then an Nginx service for reverse proxying. So for this, we need to create a Nginx image, and now I'll show you how you can create that. All right, so head up to a Docker file, basically create a Docker file for Nginx. I've created here something like Docker file.nginx, and that's just a simple file, something like first of all, the base image as Nginx, and then I have removed the default .configuration file inside the image base. The original file I've removed, and then I've copied my default.configuration inside that folder. So what is my default.configuration is this file, which is just a which is just the Nginx configuration file. So this is labeled as server, and then I have put the basic commands like listen 80, and then have put the server name as my public IP address for my EC2 instance. So for the EC2 instance, I'll show you how you can create that. I have an EC2 instance created. You can create it as well by clicking on launch instance, and then you can select the basic configurations. Just make sure to allow HTTPS and HTTP traffic so public can actually access your EC2 instance using the public IP address. All right, so now you can create an EC2 instance. I've just chosen the Ubuntu image here, and I've chosen the t2.micro instance type. All right, that's just a standard configuration for an EC2 instance. And now I'll connect to this instance using the connect button, and then I'll just connect it by clicking on this button. Let me just, all right, it is loading for me. Okay, I'll just refresh it once. All right, so I'll now connect it using this connect button, and this shall connect me to the instance using SSH inside my browser itself. And for the public IP, I can view the public IP of my instance right here, inside under the public IPv4 here. It just taking some time to load. Let it just load and I'll show you. All right, so public IP4 is right here, which I've entered inside my Nginx configuration right here. Perfect. And then for Nginx config, I have entered proxy pass, which is the standard for reverse proxying. So I've proxied my Django container. This is the name of the container which we are going to set in our Docker Compose file. So this can be anything for you. We can configure it later inside our Docker Compose file. All right, so I've entered the proxy pass right here, and now I've set some other parameters, which are some default parameters for Django Nginx configuration, or in general, any Nginx configuration, which are these host, XCL IP, and X404 parameters. All right, so this is a standard configuration file for Nginx. And also we can see we have pushed the Docker image to AWS ECR. So I'll just verify it by going to the repository and then going inside this, and I'll see a Django tag here. Perfect. So we have our Django image inside our repository right now. Now we can also push the Nginx image to our repository. So for this, I'll create my Nginx image. So I'll just create it using docker build command -t, and I'll name it something like Nginx. Then I can pass in the -f flag to name my Docker file, dockerfile.nginx. And then I can just write the full stop for referencing to the root. All right, so my Nginx image has been created now. And now if I see the Docker images, I can see Nginx right here. And now I'm going to tag my image, Nginx image, to my ECR account. How I'm going to tag that is obviously using the docker tag image, docker tag command. I'll just copy that from above and I'll tag that I'll just change the names like Nginx here and also Nginx here. Now, if I tag that image, my image shall be tagged. If I go into Docker images again, I see my tagged Nginx image right here. All right, perfect. Now I can push this image. For pushing, obviously, you need to first of all log in. So we have already logged in. So now we can move on to the pushing process. How we can push is we can run the push command again. I can remove the Django tag there and just write the Nginx here. And then if I click on push, this should start pushing the image inside the ECR repo. Right, so it is pushing. So let's just wait for it to push. Meanwhile, we just see how our instance looks like. So this is our instance. I can run my general command right here. I have a Docker Composer YML right here, but I'll create a new one for you right now. All right, so I have pushed my Nginx image to my ECR right now, and I'll just verify it by going to my ECR repository, and I'll just refresh it. I shall see an Nginx image as well. Yes, perfect. So I'm seeing an Nginx and a Django image right here. Perfect. So now we can move on to our EC2 and start configuring our EC2 instance. So before that, as you know, we have a public IP right here. So we need to add this public IP to our allowed host inside our Django application. So I'll just go inside VS Code inside the Django application and the settings. I have added allowed hosts and I've added my public IP address to those allowed hosts. So my application can actually get hosted on that public IP address. Perfect. Now I can continue building my Docker Compose file. So I'll just create it in the root itself. So I'll just name it something like Docker Compose. Before that, you need to install some dependencies, not much, but just two of them, which is sudo app install. Then I can install docker.io and Docker Compose. So just these two dependencies to run our service with ECR, or I'll just pass the Y flag. So yeah, it is already installed for me, but it will install for you. Don't worry. So now we can move on to the next one, which is creating a Docker compose.yml file now. So we'll create it by using sudo nano docker compose.yml. And I have created a Docker compose file now here. So now I'll configure this file. How I'm going to configure this is just a standard Docker compose format. So first of all, we have to write in the version parameter. So for the version, I'm going to keep it as 3.8. And then we can start declaring our services. For the services, first of all, we can declare our Django service. So I'll just name it Django, and then I can declare the image from which it's gonna uh, being copied. So I for the image part, I will uh, I will basically take this image and I will copy its URI. That's it. So the URI for this image is the image name. And if I okay, it is not gonna let me paste. If I paste, all right. So this is the image name for me. So perfect. And then we can uh, set the container name for this, which is going to be the name we had set in our Nginx config file. So as you can see for the Nginx config file, we have set that name as Django. So I'm going to put the container name as Django itself here. All right, so I'm going to put Django here. Actually, I do not need to go to the other line. I can just put here Django. All right, now I can put some other parameters like restart, which is always. So my service always gets restarted when the when the server is shut down. Then I can put and then I can expose my 8000 port because that is where eventually my Django app is going to run. All right. Now I can declare my Nginx service with the Nginx name. Then I'm going to reference it to the image, which is I think just the same URI. Just we have to replace Django app with Nginx. Perfect. Now we'll set the container name, which will be Nginx for this, just anything you want. And then I can also set the restart to always. And then I can send the depends on variable for this. So this Nginx depends on Django. So if Django doesn't work, it's Nginx will not work as well. Also, this depends on Django. All right. And then we can declare the ports. For this, the ports are just 80. We can bind our ports like 80 semicolon 80. All right, so that's how we bind the ports. And now I think we have created our Docker Compose file. Perfect. So now I can save it using Control O, Enter, and Control X. All right. So now we can do the next step, which is logging our AWS EC2 account inside our ECR directory. So how we can log in the Docker from here to our ECR registry is the same process we did for a terminal. We're going to run AWS ECR login. So how we can run is, first of all, we have to verify if we have AWS installed or not. So I think we do not have AWS here. Perfect. So now we can install that. How we want to install that? We can run the command sudo apt install AWS CLI. So that will install AWS CLI for us. All right. So if sudo apt install AWS CLI does not work for you, so we have to install AWS CLI using the curl method. So we're gonna hit a curl request to AWS CLI download server. So we're gonna hit a curl request to HTTPS, and then I'm just gonna write the URL for AWS CLI's download endpoint, which is AWS AWS.com slash AWS CLI hyphen exe hyphen Linux hyphen x86 underscore 64 dot zip. And then I can output this as something like AWS CLI v2.zip, and then I can hit this call request. So it will start downloading the AWS CLI as a zip file for us. So now if I click on ls, I shall see my zip file here. All right, so now we can unzip it. First of all, for unzipping, we have to install the unzip tool, which is sudo apt install unzip. All right, now we can unzip our file by running the command unzip. I'll just run the command unzip and then the name of our package, which is AWS CLI v2.zip. This shall unzip our file and it will just unzip the file for us. Now we can install that. How we can install that unzipped file is by running sudo and then the path to our install command inside our AWS. And I'll just show you in a second how that works. Let this get unzipped for us. All right, so that was a long install. And now I can run the command sudo dot slash AWS slash install to install my AWS CLI. All right, so now we have installed AWS. I'll just confirm it using AWS hyphen hyphen version, and it will return me a version number right here. Perfect, it is working great. Now we can move on to configure our AWS. I'll just configure it for us, which is by the command sudo AWS configure. And then I'll just enter my credentials for this. All right, so now I have configured my AWS inside this EC2, and now I can move on to logging Docker with my ECR account. Now, how can I log in is the same method we used for our terminal. So I can run the command AWS get login password, AWS ECR, actually AWS ECR. I'm just going to use sudo for this. Sudo AWS ECR get login password. And then I'm going to pass the region for this, which is AP South 1. And then I'm going to pass my Docker login command after the pipe. Docker login hyphen hyphen username going to be AWS, and I'm going to pass the password standard input as this, and I'm going to pass the URL for my each account. So that will be, if I head up here and I'll just copy this, paste it here, And I'll remove the Django app from here. So yeah, this should allow me to log in inside my all right, so I think it has login and it says login succeeded. That's perfect. I think there's one more thing to do, which is using sudo instead of Docker. So just to confirm that we are logged in both from the root user and the non-root user as well. All right, we are logged in. And now we can move on to the pulling part. All right, so we have already set up our Docker Compose file, as we can see here in the Docker Compose environment. So I can just simply run the command sudo docker compose up, and then I'm going to pass the build flag so that it will also take the pull of the images inside the Docker Compose file. So I'll now run this command and it will start taking the pull for us. After taking the pull, it is going to build that image and then run it according to the Docker Compose service we have declared. So it will run the Django service first and then the Nginx service. So let's wait for it to pull and then we can see how it goes on. And so yeah, it looks like we have our Nginx and Django containers running perfectly. So we'll just now confirm it by heading to our public IP for this URL, which is 43.234. I think this is the IP for us. And so yeah, you can see we have got our Django default page, which was the original app I had put in my Django test app. So perfect. We have deployed our Django app using ECR and EC2. So I think, yeah, guys, that's it for the video, and thanks for watching.